joining Think, Build, Launch podcast. This program is an extension of Marl Startup Studio. Marl Startup Studio was started to support students and first-time founders of all ages while they're at the idea stage of their startup. We believe there's so many innovative ideas in our community that get missed simply because individuals don't know how to take their idea into a structure that can make it an actionable plan. And that's exactly what we do. As I get started today, I wanted to say, I hope I can see everyone at College Fest downtown at Innovation Square this Saturday. I am part of Startup Alley, and we have programming between noon and 2 o'clock there in Rochester, New York at the Innovation Square. So I'm hopeful to see you there. Today, our guest is Fernanda Sesto. Fernanda is a senior at the University of Rochester studying business analytics and computer science. I'm sure when she graduates, she won't be on the market very long because both business analytics and computer science are the top jobs that are being hired right now. I just read a report recently. It's crazy. She is the president and founder of the Rochester VC Undergraduate Group and the host of the LATAM Venture Capital podcast. Fernanda has previously worked at Constellation Brands and Stepstone Group as a venture capital intern, and she's also conducted qualitative research about female entrepreneurship in Latin America. Welcome to the show, Fernanda.
Thank you, Jen. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh my goodness. You're doing so much already pre-graduation. You're such an engaged student. Where did your desire to participate come from?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So a bit about myself, just from the beginning. I'm from Uruguay, so I'm an international student. And as I was in high school, I was very involved doing volunteering and just in leadership positions. And that was just naturally me. I really enjoyed it. I really like to be, active in my community. And I think that energy that I had in high school really helped me to get here. And I kind of didn't stop since I started in high school. Now I feel like my interests are more on the professional side. I'm not as engaged as I was in community service, but it's always been present just to help out others and really try to give back what I've received. I like to create opportunities for students and for people to just have more in their play and have more knowledge available to them, so that they can, have these resources that I also received, and they can do things in the future with that as well. And I like connecting with people. So the podcast, for example, is just because I love connecting with people. I love chatting. And I think that is where it comes from.
I think where we contribute and how we contribute changes over time based on how our sphere of influence changes, but the commitment to make a difference stays constant. So I see that in your work as you evolve, which is fantastic. You're passionate for Latin America, and you have such a commitment to positive change with venture capital, especially for female entrepreneurs. Where did your passion for that and focus come from?
Yeah, so this is very, very tied to my personal background. As I said, I'm from Uruguay. I went to a computer science high school in Uruguay, and I was the only female student in my class for 3 years. And that was, of course, very challenging for, I was a teenager. I was, trying to find my space in my career and what I wanted to do. And I didn't have any role models at the moment because all my professors were also male, and I didn't have any girlfriends during high school. So it was very challenging. And I think that made a big impact on my identity and what I want to do in the future. And so I graduated in 2017, and then I took almost 2 years off after high school to prepare to come to the United States and apply to colleges. And while I was doing that, I got a job at a software company. The software company recruits people from this high school specifically because we get a lot of technical skills. And while I was there, one of the CEOs, there were two CEOs, was a woman, and she was such a big influence on me and such a big role model that I realized that when I do have someone that I can relate to, specifically a woman, I feel more motivated to really just get into this field, into tech, and I feel like I saw that there's space for me or someone like me in there. And because I saw someone that was so successful and she was pretty young, she was like around 30, and I looked up to her at that age. And I saw the difference between like my motivations between being in high school with no female professors or no female role models in tech and having a role model. So when I came to the States, I started looking at this influence of like, oh, do like female role models actually influence young girls or young women in their career studies and what their interests. And that's where this research that you mentioned in the introduction came from, because I was trying to understand if these female entrepreneurs in Latin America had some female role models in the past. And while I was doing that, I started looking at like the tech industry, and most of the CEOs are men. And the famous CEOs in tech that we know are all men. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, they're all men. And I started like looking at these patterns, and that's how I found out about venture capital. And when I found out that only 2% of venture capital goes to female founders, I was like blown away. And I was like, wow, maybe this is like one of the reasons why we don't have many female founders on top. And then not having female founders as successful as the female, as the male founders in tech might actually influence how many women get into technology, because there are no female role models of it, like out there, like really like getting a lot of attention and making like signaling to young girls that this is an industry that they can be in. And that was the whole process for me that it took like when I was a freshman. And then from there, I kind of started like, reading more about female founders, what the experience is like for female founders in Latin America. I did the interview. It was a pretty interesting interview. I posted an article. And yeah, I found out that there are many factors actually that influence female founders. They do feel like there are not many women around them, and that they did not have a lot of female mentors or female role models. So that was interesting, because they're still doing it. They're still female founders and they're still successful, even though they didn't have any mentors. So that was the original drive for me.
I think it's so, I'm like, how can we get you to speak in front of high school students today? Right? Because what I love about the ecosystem that you invite is that the modeling happens as soon as possible. Having a role model that looks like you can increase participation, confidence, and engagement, from seeing a teacher to seeing a founder to actually being a VC and actually being able to acknowledge and fund other people. So you're well on your way to lead, hopefully, a fund and speak to as many young women as possible, and of course as many young Latin American women as well. You've traveled quite a bit. What have you learned about entrepreneurship and traveling?
Yeah, I love traveling. I was abroad in Barcelona last semester. I had a really good time. I think entrepreneurship, varies a lot across different regions of the world. I would say there are different drives that for each entrepreneur, depending on the region. For example, LATAM founders are very need driven. So that means that there's a lot of problems. The opportunity lies in like basic needs. Sometimes there are a lot of like basic services that are not met because it's a developing region that really like kind of puts the entrepreneur in the place of solving these problems that are just so basic and that are like kind of like need driven. It's not just for the sake of like, oh, I see an opportunity or I create an opportunity. It's more like there's a need for this because like we really need this from a basic perspective, like transportation or food, stuff like that. So I think that's for example, for Latin America, it's a very distinct like factor. And then for Europe and the United States, the other places I've been, I think it's more since, like the basics are kind of covered already and there's a lot of options. It's more the market. I feel like it's more on the growth and like on the growth and like later stages. And so the the ecosystems are more mature, and I feel like the entrepreneurs are also more mature. There's more experience on how to raise funds, how to start a company, and so the services and the products that you see are also pretty different because they are more trying to target like very like specifics, like verticals or niches that I feel like in Latam yet like there's not the infrastructure around there because these basics are not covered yet, basically. So I think it depends, like on what the general like region, like economic region is like, and like the quality of life of the people. Like, so like I find Latin American entrepreneurship pretty interesting because it's the intersection of kind of like, impact and just a business and like making money, because that's where the big opportunities are, because these needs are not met. So kind of like the entrepreneurs are taking matters into their own hands. And I find that pretty interesting personally.
I think it's interesting as well. The idea that innovation can come from solving interesting problems, but it also can come from solving like real world problems. Food, water, shelter, access to electricity, and our ability to grow as a country, as a region, is really how well we respect the ecosystems at large and realize what an opportunity we have to mentor and accelerate the community's ability to thrive at large. What are 2 or 3 ways that students that are listening to your program can take more action to be community builders? Again, for those listening in the Rochester, Monroe County and surrounding areas, there are about 800,000 students across all of several schools. And so my hope is that students are listening to Think, Build, Launch. And I'm wondering, what are 2 to 3 things that students can do to take more action like you have done?
Yeah, I think that the first thing that I would say is that they should really try to focus on their passion. Like, what is that you love? I think it's really hard to do something and to really put the work that you need to do sometimes to make an impact if you're not passionate about it. Don't try to force yourself into something that you're not really passionate. It can be arts, for example. There's a lot of ways that you can help and be innovative in arts. And it can be, like computer science, yes, like which is like more common. Sometimes like from a VC angle, we see a lot of people like trying to do startups and things like that. But I feel like innovation and having an impact can be in anything as long as you're passionate in it. Like you have to be really passionate about it. Then the second thing is like, be very intentional about what you do. Once like you have discovered your passion and you know what you like, where your interests lie and stuff, like you really need to do that introspection. Be very intentional about your next steps. Be very intentional who you talk to. Be very intentional like what kind of questions you ask, and then what type of group or team you found. Sometimes maybe like you don't need like a lot of people if those people are not engaged. You need to be very intentional, like in general, about your career choices, what internships you get, stuff like that. I think that when you're intentional, it's not just, oh, I took this because I have no idea what I'm going to do. Like it just leads you to a better narrative. And then when you graduate college, like it puts you at a better space just for like, finding a full-time job and also understanding what you want to do in your career in general. So I think, those 2 things, just like understanding why you want to do it, and just, how you want to do it in a way, the intentionality behind it. I think it's so important.
That's amazing. So we have been spending our time with Fernanda Sesto, leadership, research, advocacy. What great modeling you are doing here. I'd like to thank you all for joining the program today. I'd also like to thank Startup Grind Rochester, Upstate Venture Connect, Upstate Capital of New York, NixCore, RIT, University of Rochester for your partnership with the Marl Startup Studio and the collaboration that has allowed this region to become an entrepreneurship tipping point. Finally, I'd like to thank our producer, Scott Fitzgerald at Rockfox Studios. If you have an idea and want to know more about our program, connect with me at marlaccelerator.com. Please subscribe to our program and we'll continue to provide information and inspiration about taking your idea from a concept to a business. This is Jennifer Sertl. Thank you for joining us.